The doorbell rings, and something inside you collapses. Not dramatically, not violently, but like a carefully constructed internal sanctuary suddenly breached by unwanted sound. Your body tenses, your breath catches. A wave of resistance moves through you before conscious thought can even form words. You weren't expecting anyone, and even if you were, even if this visit was scheduled, agreed upon, marked on the calendar, that feeling still arrives. That instant contraction, that wordless no that rises from somewhere deeper than social conditioning. They think you're being difficult, antisocial, cold. They tell you that people need connection, that isolation is unhealthy, that you should be grateful someone wants to spend time with you. But here's what they don't understand. You're not rejecting connection. You're protecting something infinitely more fragile than they can perceive. You're guarding the architecture of your inner world, a world that collapses under the weight of performative presence. This is not a social anxiety disorder. This is not rudeness or misanthropy or fear. This is spiritual discernment. And it's time we stop apologizing for it. We live under what I call extrovert supremacy, an unspoken cultural agreement that outward-facing energy is superior to inward-dwelling consciousness. Think about the language we use. When someone is social, gregarious, constantly surrounded by people, we call them vibrant, charismatic, well-adjusted, successful, alive. When someone prefers solitude, guards their space, limits social exposure, we call them withdrawn, isolated, antisocial, depressed, broken. Notice the value judgment baked into the vocabulary itself. Our entire social infrastructure is designed for extroverted energy. Open-plan offices that eliminate privacy. Social media platforms that punish absence. Cultural narratives that equate alone time with loneliness, silence with sadness, boundaries with coldness. The message is clear and relentless. If you're not constantly engaging with others, something is wrong with you. But here's the uncomfortable truth that spiritually awake people have discovered. The extrovert gold standard is a lie designed to keep you externally focused, perpetually distracted, and energetically depleted. It's not a conscious conspiracy. It's an emergent property of a civilization that has lost touch with the inner life. A world so terrified of its own depths that it mistakes constant stimulation for vitality. And those of us who've awakened to our inner landscape, we become heretics in this religion of constant connection. Let me tell you something fundamental that society refuses to acknowledge. People operate on fundamentally different energy systems. For some people, true extroverts, social interaction is energy generation. They plug into others like solar panels facing the sun. Connection charges them. Conversation fuels them. Being alone drains their batteries. But for others, introverts, sensitives, the spiritually awake, the energy economy works in reverse. Social interaction is energy expenditure. Every conversation, every presence, every moment of being on draws from a finite reservoir. And that reservoir refills only in solitude, in silence, in the sacred absence of external demands. This is not a preference. This is not shyness or social awkwardness or something therapy can't fix. This is your fundamental energetic architecture. And when visitors arrive at your door, expected or not, they're not just asking for your time. They're asking you to open the vault where your life force is stored and hand them portions of your soul's energy to sustain their presence in your space. The spiritually awake feel this transaction viscerally. They feel the cost before the visit even begins. They feel the performance that will be required, the mask that must be worn, the sacred space that must be temporarily abandoned to accommodate someone else's energy field. And the doorbell becomes a warning signal. Your sanctuary is about to be invaded. Here's what happens when visitors arrive, even welcomed ones. You shift. Something in you that was relaxed, authentic, unguarded. It contracts. Armor goes up. The social mask slides into place. The version of you that exists for public consumption takes over. And suddenly, you're not in your home anymore. You're on stage. Even with people you love. Even with people who theoretically get you. Because the moment another consciousness enters your space, You begin performing some version of acceptability. You adjust your volume, your energy, your presence to accommodate theirs. You monitor their comfort, read their signals, manage their experience of being in your space. You become responsible not just for your own state, but for maintaining the social ecosystem their presence creates. This is exhausting. And for the spiritually awake, it's more than exhausting. It's a violation of something sacred. Because your home isn't just a building. It's the only place where you can drop the mask entirely. Where you can exist in your unedited self. Where you can be formless, undefined, free from the constant negotiation of social identity. Visitors, no matter how well-intentioned, disrupt this. They turn your temple into a theater. And the spiritually awake recognize this cost immediately, in their bones, before their mind can rationalize it away. Let's talk about what your home actually is. Not what society tells you it should be. A showroom for guests, a status symbol, a space designed for entertaining others. What it actually is, a direct extension of your inner world. Every object you've chosen, every corner you've arranged, every atmosphere you've cultivated, these are not random. They are physical manifestations of your psyche. Your home is your inner life made visible, made tangible, made safe. When you're alone in your space, something profound happens. The boundary between inner and outer dissolves. You're not in your home. You are your home. The space becomes a second skin, an extended nervous system, a container holding your consciousness in its most natural state. This is why decorating feels so personal. Why certain objects hold inexplicable importance. Why clutter in your space feels like clutter in your mind. Why rearranging your environment can shift your entire emotional state. Your home is not separate from you. It's a three-dimensional expression of your soul. And when visitors arrive, they're not just entering a building. They're entering you. Here's something the spiritually awake understand that others often don't. Everyone leaves an energetic residue. This isn't mysticism. This is observable reality. Science calls it mirror neurons, pheromones, electromagnetic fields. Ancient wisdom calls it aura, chi, vibrational frequency. Whatever you name it, the truth remains. When someone enters your space, they leave traces of their energy behind. Their mood, their thoughts, their unresolved trauma, their unconscious patterns, all of it enters your sanctuary and lingers long after they've physically left. Ever had someone visit who was angry, anxious, or depressed, and felt that heaviness remain in your home for hours or even days afterward? That's not imagination. That's energetic imprint. The spiritually awake are hypersensitive to this. They feel when their space has been contaminated by energies that don't belong there. They feel the dissonance, the disturbance, the way their carefully cultivated atmosphere has been disrupted by someone else's frequency. And it takes work, real energetic work, to clear it. Burning sage, opening windows, playing specific music, sitting in meditation to recalibrate the space. These aren't superstitions. These are acts of energetic hygiene, necessary rituals to restore the sanctity of your temple after it's been penetrated by foreign consciousness. This is why unexpected visitors feel like violations. Because they are violations, not of social etiquette, but of energetic boundaries. They are forcing you to absorb and process their energy field without your consent, without preparation, without the chance to protect what you've built. For the spiritually awake, home serves a function that goes beyond shelter or comfort. It's a sanctuary in the truest sense, a sacred space separated from the chaos of the outer world, where deep work can happen. What kind of deep work? Integration of shadow material processing of emotional experience cultivation of inner peace connection to higher consciousness healing of old wounds creative emergence authentic, self-expression spiritual practice. None of this can happen in performance mode. None of this can happen while you're managing someone else's energy, monitoring their comfort, maintaining social cohesion. This work requires aloneness, not as absence of connection, but as presence with self. And when visitors disrupt this, they are not just interrupting your day. They are interrupting your evolution. They are asking you to abandon the most important work you'll ever do, the work of becoming yourself, to perform the role of host, friend, family member, socially acceptable human. The spiritually awake have learned, often painfully, that this exchange is not worth it. That protecting the sanctuary is not selfishness, it's survival. Let's expose something uncomfortable. You are not yourself around other people, even with those closest to you, even with people you love and trust completely. There is always some degree of editing, filtering, performing happening beneath your conscious awareness. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we construct to navigate the world without being destroyed by it. It's not dishonesty, it's adaptation. It's how we bridge the gap between our raw inner experience and the demands of collective existence. But here's what Jung also understood. The persona becomes toxic when there's no place to remove it. When you're always on, always performing some version of social acceptability, the mask begins to fuse with your face. You forget where the performance ends and the authentic self begins. You become alienated from your own experience, living life through a character you invented for survival. This is spiritual death. And your home, your sanctuary, is supposed to be the one place where the mask can come off entirely, where you can be formless, undefined, free from the constant negotiation of identity, where you can exist in your unfiltered, unedited, uncensored truth without fear of judgment, rejection, or misunderstanding. But when visitors arrive, the mask goes back on. Even if they are not demanding it, even if they claim they want you to just be yourself. Because the moment another consciousness is present, you begin modulating, adjusting, performing, often unconsciously. You speak differently, move differently, think differently. The part of you that was wild, raw, authentic, it retreats. The socially acceptable version takes over, and the spiritually awake feel this violence. They feel the loss of authenticity, the betrayal of self, the way their sacred space transformed from temple to theater the moment the doorbell rings. Let's be precise about what happens energetically when visitors arrive. 1. The greeting performance. You must generate enthusiasm, warmth, welcoming energy, regardless of your actual state. Even if you are just in deep meditation, creative flow, or emotional processing, you must abandon that immediately and project. I'm so glad you're here. 2. The small talk tax. Before any real connection can occur, if it ever does, you must navigate the ritual of surface conversation. How are you? How was traffic? Nice weather. This requires generating false interest in topics that bore or drain you, while suppressing your authentic emotional state. 3. The comfort management. You become responsible for their experience. Are they comfortable? Do they need water? Is the temperature okay? Should you offer food? This transforms you from inhabitant to hotel manager in your own space. 4. The constant calibration. You're monitoring their energy, reading their signals, adjusting your behavior to maintain social equilibrium. This requires a massive portion of your processing power running in the background, preventing you from accessing deeper states of consciousness. 5. The topic navigation. You must steer conversations away from anything too deep, too dark, too authentic, unless you've explicitly agreed otherwise. Most social visits require staying on the surface, which means suppressing 90% of what you're actually thinking and feeling. 6. The energy matching. If they are upbeat, you must match that or risk seeming depressed. If they are negative, you must either absorb it or expend energy trying to lift them. Either way, your natural state gets overridden by the demands of energetic compatibility. 7. The extended goodbye. Even when you're completely depleted, you must maintain the performance through the entire exit process, often extending the visit by 15 to 30 minutes as they hover near the door, continuing to drain your reserves. Now multiply this by every visitor, every social obligation, every it would be rude not to situation. The spiritually awake recognize this tax as unsustainable. They see that society expects them to constantly spend energy they don't have on interactions that don't nourish them, while guilting them for any attempt at self-preservation. Here's the deepest wound. When you're forced to perform in your own sanctuary, you become homeless even in your own home. The one place you should be able to exist without pretense becomes another stage requiring another performance. And each time this happens, the gap between your authentic self and your performed self widens. You begin to lose touch with who you actually are. Because if you're never allowed to be fully yourself, if every space requires some degree of masking, then your authentic self begins to atrophy. It becomes theoretical rather than experimental. You know intellectually that there's a real you beneath the masks, but you can't actually access that truth because you're never given the conditions where it can emerge. This is spiritual suffocation, and the spiritually awake would rather be called antisocial than continue suffocating. They've learned, often through painful trial and error, that protecting the spaces where authenticity is possible is not optional. It's essential for psychological survival. There's an ancient archetype that lives in every wisdom tradition across human history. The hermit, the desert father, the forest sage, the mountain mystic, the one who withdraws from society not from hatred or fear, but from recognition that truth requires solitude. This figure appears everywhere, in Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, indigenous traditions, because it represents something fundamental about the spiritual journey. Awakening requires separation, not forever, not as the final destination, but as a necessary phase. A cocoon stage where the old self dies and something new can emerge. The hermit doesn't reject the world out of contempt. The hermit recognizes that the noise, the performance, the constant external demands, these things prevent the deep work that consciousness requires to evolve. And in our modern context, you don't need to move to a cave to be the hermit. You just need to guard your door. When you resist visitors, when you protect your solitude, when you choose silence over socializing, you're not being antisocial. You're activating an ancient archetype. You're honoring a pattern that mystics and sages have followed for millennia. You're entering the hermit phase. And this phase is not a problem to be solved. It's a sacred passage to be honored. Here's what most people don't understand about spiritual awakening. It requires you to die and be reborn, often multiple times. Not metaphorically. Actually, the person you were, with all their beliefs, identities, defenses, stories, that person must dissolve. And in that dissolution, there's a period of formlessness, a liminal space where you're no longer who you were but not yet who you're becoming. This is the hermit phase. This is the cocoon, the chrysalis, the tomb before resurrection. And it cannot happen in public. It cannot happen while you're performing social roles, managing other people's energy, maintaining the mask. It requires total privacy, complete safety, absolute freedom from external demands. When spiritually awake people resist visitors, they are often, consciously or not, protecting this sacred death process. They are in the midst of ego dissolution, shadow integration, belief system collapse, or identity reconstruction. And having to suddenly put on the social mask feels like being forced to reassemble a self they're actively trying to transcend. It's not just uncomfortable, it's spiritually violent. Imagine being in the middle of surgery and someone asking you to get up and make them dinner. That's what it feels like when you're in deep spiritual transformation and the doorbell rings. Spiritual awakening isn't just about peak experiences and cosmic insights. It's about integration. Taking those experiences and weaving them into your lived reality, your daily consciousness, your actual behavior. And integration requires time, space, and solitude. You need time to process what you've learned, to metabolize new understanding, to allow shifts in consciousness to settle into your nervous system. This can't be rushed. It can't happen between social obligations. It requires extended periods of uninterrupted inwardness. When you have a profound realization about reality, about yourself, about existence, you can't just immediately return to small talk about traffic and weather. You need time to let that realization rewrite your internal operating system. This is why the spiritually awake become increasingly protective of their solitude. They are not hiding from life. They are integrating more life than most people can imagine. Dimensions of experience, levels of consciousness, truths about existence that are so vast and destabilizing that they require careful, patient, private assimilation. Visitors interrupt this process, and each interruption means insights remain unintegrated, experiences remain unprocessed, and spiritual growth stalls while you perform the role of socially available human. Let's address the weapon society uses to keep you available. Guilt. You've been programmed since childhood to feel guilty for prioritizing your needs over others' desires, for saying no, for protecting your energy, for choosing solitude over socializing. The programming sounds like this. Family comes first, even when family drains you. You should be grateful people want to spend time with you, as if attention is always valuable. Isolation is unhealthy, conflating solitude with loneliness. You're being selfish, making self-preservation morally wrong. What will people think? Outsourcing your worth to others' judgment. This guilt is the chain that keeps you energetically enslaved. It keeps you opening doors you want to keep closed, accepting visits you don't want, performing connection you don't feel, all while your inner world slowly starves from neglect. The spiritually awake must break this programming. They must learn to feel the guilt, because it will come, because it's been conditioned into you, and choose their boundaries anyway. They must recognize that guilt is not moral guidance. It's just social conditioning. And social conditioning doesn't care about your spiritual evolution. It cares about maintaining the status quo. Here's a reframe that changes everything. Setting energetic boundaries is not selfishness. It's self-reverence. When you protect your space, your solitude, your energy from uninvited intrusion, you're not rejecting others. You're honoring the sacredness of your own consciousness. You're saying, my inner life matters. My spiritual work matters. My authentic self matters, and it deserves protection. This is not arrogance. This is basic self-respect. You wouldn't let someone randomly rifle through your mail, your journal, your most private thoughts. Why would you let them randomly penetrate the energetic space where those private experiences occur? Your home, your sanctuary, is the container for your soul's work. And protecting that container is not optional. It's essential. The spiritually awake learn to say, I'm not available for unannounced visits. I need advance notice before anyone comes over. I'm in a period of deep inner work and need solitude. That doesn't work for me right now. No. Full stop. No explanation required. And they learn to say these things without apologizing, without over-explaining, without trying to make others comfortable with their discomfort. Because their energy, their peace, their spiritual evolution, these are not negotiable. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself, here's a practice that changes lives. Start tracking your energy like you track your money. After every social interaction, every visit, every phone call, every obligation, ask yourself, did this nourish me or drain me? Do I feel more myself or less myself after this? Did this interaction honor my authentic needs or violate them? Am I giving from overflow or from depletion? Keep a journal. Be ruthlessly honest. Notice patterns. You'll discover something profound. Most of your social interactions are net negative energetically. They cost more than they provide. They deplete more than they nourish. They are energy vampirism disguised as connection. And once you see this clearly, once you have data, you can make different choices. You can begin to ruthlessly protect your energy from people, situations, and obligations that drain without reciprocating. You can start investing your limited social energy only in interactions that actually nourish your soul. This isn't misanthropy. This is discernment. The spiritually awake recognize that energy is finite, that depletion is real, and that saying yes to everyone means saying no to yourself. Here's where most people get confused. They conflate solitude with loneliness. They assume that if you prefer being alone, you must be lonely, suffering from lack of connection, isolated, sad, missing out on human warmth. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding. Loneliness is the pain of being disconnected from others when you need connection. Sacred aloneness is the joy of being connected to yourself when you need depth. These are not the same experience. Loneliness is a wound. Aloneness is a choice. Loneliness happens to you. Aloneness is something you create. The spiritually awake are not lonely when they are alone. They are finally present, finally able to hear their own thoughts, feel their own feelings, access their own wisdom without interference. They are not missing connection. They're experiencing the deepest connection possible, connection with the self that exists beneath all social performance. This is not deprivation. This is nourishment. And confusing the two, insisting that someone who loves solitude must be suffering, is a form of violence. It invalidates their experience, pathologizes their nature, and tries to force them into a mode of being that doesn't serve their soul. Let's be absolutely clear about the energetic reality. For some people, solitude is not rest from connection. It's the actual source of their life force. This is not poetic metaphor. This is biochemical fact. Introverts, and especially spiritually sensitive people, literally regenerate their energy in solitude. Their nervous systems calm. Their cortisol drops. Their creativity returns. Their sense of self solidifies. Social interaction, by contrast, activates their stress response. Even pleasant social interaction, even with people they love, because it requires constant monitoring, adjusting, performing, all of which depletes their system. So when spiritually awake people resist visitors, they are not being antisocial. They are engaging in basic survival maintenance. They are protecting their ability to function, to create, to contribute to the world in the ways that are actually authentic to their nature. Because here's the irony. The most powerful gifts spiritually awake people have to offer the world come from their depth, their introspection, their ability to access wisdom and solitude. Artists, writers, mystics, philosophers, healers, visionaries, most of them are not social butterflies. They are hermits who've done deep work in solitude and then bring those fruits back to the collective. But they can only do this work if they protect the solitude where it happens. There's another reason spiritually awake people resist visitors. Most social interaction is catastrophically shallow. This isn't judgment. It's observation. Most conversations operate on the surface, discussing externals, trading gossip, sharing opinions about things that don't matter, filling silence with noise. For someone who's done deep inner work, who's faced their shadow, questioned their existence, grappled with mortality, touched the void, small talk feels like violence. It's not that they are superior. It's that they've developed a taste for depth that surface interactions can't satisfy. It's like being hungry and someone offering you cardboard, technically food-shaped, but completely without nourishment. The spiritually awake crave conversations about the nature of consciousness, the meaning of suffering, the architecture of reality, the depths of human experience, the mysteries that haunt existence, the edges of what can be known. But most visitors want to talk about the weather, their job, complaint, celebrity gossip, what they watched on TV, surface-level life updates. Can you feel the mismatch? It's not that one is better than the other. It's that they are speaking different languages, operating at different frequencies. And the spiritually awake find it exhausting to constantly downshift their consciousness to meet others on the surface. So they avoid the interaction entirely, not from arrogance, but from self-preservation. Because engaging in shallow conversation while your soul hungers for depth is a special kind of starvation. Let's examine a particularly insidious piece of social programming. You've been taught that being a good person means being available, welcoming, accommodating. That your home should be open to others. That refusing visitors makes you cold, rude, selfish. This programming serves a function. It keeps you accessible, available, exploitable. It keeps you in service to others' needs at the expense of your own. It prevents you from developing the strong boundaries necessary for spiritual development. It ensures you remain externally focused rather than developing internal depth. The spiritually awake must reject this programming entirely. Not because hospitality is wrong, genuine, chosen, mutual hospitality can be beautiful, but because obligatory hospitality is a trap. It's servitude disguised as virtue. Real hospitality emerges from overflow, when you're so full, so nourished, so complete that sharing your space feels joyful rather than depleting. But when you're empty, when you're in the process of filling yourself, of doing your inner work, of protecting the tender growth of your authentic self, hospitality becomes self-betrayal. And the spiritually awake choose self-loyalty over social approval. Something beautiful is happening in our culture. Introverts are waking up. Sensitives are finding each other. The spiritually awake are refusing to keep apologizing for their nature. For decades, centuries, extroversion has been the assumed ideal. Introverts were told to come out of their shell, to be more social, to overcome their shyness as if it were a disease. But we're witnessing a cultural shift. Books like Quiet by Susan Cain. Communities forming around sensitivity and depth. People openly identifying as introverts without shame. The normalization of "I need alone time" as a valid human need. This is a rebellion. A quiet one, appropriately, but a rebellion nonetheless. It's the reclamation of inwardness as valuable, of solitude as sacred, of boundaries as healthy. It's the rejection of the extrovert supremacy that has dominated Western culture for too long. And the spiritually awake are at the forefront of this revolution. Every time they say no to an unwanted visit, they are voting for a different value system. One that honors depth over breadth, quality over quantity, authenticity over performance, inner life over social performance. This is not antisocial behavior. This is cultural evolution. Here's what the spiritually awake are discovering. True community is not about constant physical proximity. It's about resonance across distance. You don't need to be in someone's living room to have a real connection with them. You don't need frequent visits to maintain a meaningful relationship. You don't need to sacrifice your solitude to prove you care. Real connection, soul-level connection, transcends physical presence. It's possible to feel closer to someone you see once a year but have profound conversations with than to someone who visits weekly but never moves beyond the surface. The spiritually awake are building new models of community. Intentional, scheduled connection rather than random intrusion, deep, meaningful exchanges rather than frequent shallow contact, respect for energetic boundaries as an act of love, quality of presence over quantity of time, virtual connection that honors physical solitude, chosen family based on resonance rather than obligation. This is not isolation. This is evolved connection. Connection that respects that different souls have different needs. That honors solitude as sacred rather than treating it as a problem. That allows people to show up authentically rather than performing availability they don't feel. If you've recognized yourself in these words, here are practical strategies for protecting your sacred space without destroying your relationships. 1. Establish clear boundaries early. Don't wait until you're depleted to set boundaries. Communicate your needs proactively. I love connecting with you, and I also need significant alone time to function well. I prefer planned visits with advance notice rather than drop-ins. 2. Designate social windows. Create specific times when you're available for socializing, and protect the rest. I'm available for visits on Saturday afternoons. The rest of the week is my inner work time. 3. Offer alternatives. You can maintain connection without sacrificing your sanctuary. Instead of visiting at home, can we meet at a cafe? Let's have a phone call instead of an in-person visit. 4. Be honest about your nature. Stop pretending to be more socially available than you actually are. I'm someone who needs a lot of solitude to function. That's not personal. It's just how my energy works. 5. Create a no visitors signal. For the people closest to you, establish a clear signal. When my car is in the driveway but I don't answer the door, I'm in deep work mode. Please text instead. 6. Practice saying no without guilt. You don't owe anyone access to your space. Practice. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for visits right now. I need this time for myself. No explanation. No apology. Just clear, kind boundary. 7. Curate your social circle. Ruthlessly evaluate which relationships actually nourish you. Invest your limited social energy only in those that reciprocate depth, respect boundaries, and honor your nature. 8. Create a decompression ritual. For when visitors are unavoidable, develop a practice to clear the energy afterward. Burning sage or incense, opening windows, taking a shower, meditating, listening to specific music, whatever helps you reclaim your space. Here's what will happen when you start protecting your solitude. Some people will be offended. They'll call you selfish, distant, cold. They'll accuse you of not caring, of abandoning them, of thinking you're too good for them. This is predictable and not your problem to fix. Their offense reveals their own programming, their belief that your energy belongs to them, that your space should always be available, that boundaries are rejection. But you are not responsible for managing other people's emotional reactions to your healthy boundaries. You are responsible for protecting your energy, honoring your nature, and creating the conditions where your authentic self can survive and thrive. Some relationships won't survive your boundaries, and that's information. It tells you those relationships were based on your performance, your availability, your willingness to sacrifice yourself, not on genuine mutual respect. The relationships that survive your boundaries, that respect them, honor them, adjust to accommodate them, those are your real relationships. Those are the people who love the actual you, not the performed version. Protecting your solitude is not about short-term comfort. It's about long-term spiritual survival and evolution. Every time you honor your need for alone time, you're strengthening your connection to your authentic self, developing discernment about what actually nourishes you, building the capacity for deeper consciousness, creating space for creativity, insight, healing to emerge, modeling healthy boundaries for others refusing to participate in collective depletion culture. This is not selfish. This is essential, because the world doesn't need more people who've learned to perform availability while slowly dying inside. The world needs people who've done their inner work, who've integrated their shadow, who've touched their depths and brought back wisdom from a journey. And that work happens in solitude. The doorbell rings, and this time, you don't answer. Not from fear, not from rudeness, but from recognition that your energy is sacred, your space is holy, and your need for solitude is not a flaw to apologize for but a truth to honor. You're not rejecting the world. You're protecting the inner territory where your real work happens, where your authentic self lives, where transformation unfolds in its own time, away from performance and social pressure. The spiritually awake have learned something that society desperately doesn't want you to know. Your presence with yourself is more valuable than your performance for others. This doesn't make you antisocial. It makes you wise. You've recognized that not all connection is nourishing, that not all visitors bring value, that your energy is finite and precious and not owed to anyone who demands it. You've learned to distinguish between loneliness and sacred aloneness, between isolation and intentional solitude, between social anxiety and spiritual discernment. And you've chosen yourself, not from narcissism, but from necessity, because you finally understand that you cannot give from an empty vessel, that you cannot maintain depth while living on the surface, that you cannot evolve while constantly performing. The hermit phase is not a failure. It's a metamorphosis. You're not disappearing from the world. You're descending into yourself, into the depths where real transformation happens, where authentic wisdom emerges, where the masks finally come off and you meet who you actually are beneath the performance. This takes time. It takes silence. It takes the kind of solitude that society calls selfish but sages call sacred. So when the doorbell rings and every fiber of your being resists, trust that resistance. It's not social anxiety. It's soul intelligence. It's your deepest self saying, not now, not yet. This work I'm doing in the quiet, this matters more. Here's what I want you to understand, truly understand, in your bones. You are not broken for needing solitude. You are not antisocial for protecting your energy. You are not cold for choosing depth over shallow connection. You are not failing at life because you don't want constant visitors. You are simply awake. Awake to the fact that your inner life is real and requires tending. Awake to the energetic cost of performance. Awake to the difference between authentic connection and social obligation. Awake to your own nature, even when that nature doesn't match what society demands. And that awakening, that recognition that your solitude is sacred, that your boundaries are holy, that your need for silence is not a sickness but a strength, that is not something to apologize for. That is something to protect, fiercely, unapologetically, without guilt, because the world does not need more people who've mastered the art of social performance while losing themselves in the process. The world needs people who've sat with themselves in the dark, who've faced their shadows and integrated them, who've touched the void and returned with wisdom, who've learned to be at home in their own consciousness. And you cannot become that person while constantly accommodating visitors who drain the energy required for the journey. So here's my invitation to you. Stop apologizing. Stop explaining why you need alone time as if it's a defect that requires justification. Stop feeling guilty for saying no to visitors, for protecting your space, for choosing silence over socializing. Stop trying to make yourself more extroverted, more available, more accommodating than your soul actually wants to be. Just stop. And instead, start honoring. Honor the pull towards solitude as sacred guidance. Honor the resistance to visitors as energetic wisdom. Honor your need for silence as spiritual necessity. Honor the hermit archetype living in you, the part that knows transformation happens in caves, not at parties. In silence, not in noise. In aloneness, not in constant company. Let your home be what it actually is, a temple for your consciousness, a sanctuary for your soul, a laboratory for your transformation. And protect it like you'd protect anything sacred. With boundaries, with clarity, with the understanding that not everyone deserves access to your inner world just because they want it. And if you're someone who doesn't understand this, if you're reading this trying to understand why someone in your life keeps resisting your visits, here's what I want you to see. Their need for solitude is not about you. It's not rejection. It's not coldness. It's not evidence that they don't care. It's evidence that they're doing work you might not understand, that they operate on a different energy system than you do, that what drains them might energize you, and what nourishes them might bore you. And that's okay. Different souls need different conditions to thrive. If you love someone who needs solitude, the most loving thing you can do is respect it. Not take it personally, not try to fix them, not pressure them to be more available. Just let them be. Let them have their hermit time. Let them protect their sanctuary. Let them emerge from solitude when they are ready, rather than forcing them out before the transformation is complete. Because the person who emerges from deep solitude, who's done their inner work, integrated their shadow, touched their depths, that person will show up in the world with so much more authenticity, wisdom, and genuine presence than the depleted, performing version who never gets time alone. The gift is worth the wait. What we're witnessing, this resistance to visitors, this protection of solitude, this choosing of depth over performance, is not a social problem. It's a spiritual awakening, a collective recognition that the way we've been doing connection is unsustainable, that constant availability is a modern tyranny, that depth cannot be maintained in perpetual shallowness. The spiritually awake are the advanced scouts of a new paradigm, one where solitude is valued as much as socializing, where boundaries are understood as healthy, not hostile, where your home is recognized as sacred space, not public accommodation, where introversion is honored as a valid way of being, not a disorder to fix, where quality of connection matters more than quantity of contact, where you can love people deeply while also needing significant time away from them. This is not antisocial evolution. This is spiritual maturation. It's humanity learning, finally, that not all ancient tribal instincts serve us in modern life. That constant togetherness made sense when we lived in small groups on the savannah, but destroys our souls in the context of modern overstimulation. We're adapting, evolving, learning new ways of being human that honor both connection and solitude, both community and individuality, both relationship and sacred aloneness. And the spiritually awake, the ones who resist visitors, who protect their energy, who choose silence, they're not failing at the old paradigm. They are building the new one. If you've read this far, you know this isn't just about visitors. It's about something deeper. It's about reclaiming your right to exist in your unperformed truth, to have spaces where you don't owe anyone anything, to protect the fragile, essential work of becoming yourself in a world that wants to keep you performing someone else. The doorbell will ring again, and you will feel that familiar resistance, that tightening in your chest, that wordless no rising from depths you can't fully explain. And now you'll know, that's not social anxiety. That's not coldness. That's not dysfunction. That's your soul protecting its sanctuary. That's your spirit honoring its need for depth. That's your authentic self refusing to be exiled from the one place it should always be welcome, your own home. So let the doorbell ring. Let people think what they think. Let them call you antisocial, distant, too much, not enough. You know the truth. You're not disappearing from the world. You're descending into yourself. And what you find there, in the silence, in the solitude, in the sacred aloneness, will be more real, more valuable, more truly you than anything you could perform for visitors in your living room. The spiritually awake don't like visitors because they've learned something the world is still trying to forget. The most important conversation you'll ever have is with yourself. And that conversation requires silence. So here it is, the permission you've been waiting for, the permission society refuses to give you. You are allowed to need solitude. You are allowed to protect your space from intrusion. You are allowed to say no to visitors without explanation. You are allowed to be antisocial if that's what others want to call your self-preservation. You are allowed to choose silence over noise, depth over surface, authenticity over performance. You are allowed to be the hermit when you need to be the hermit. You are allowed to close your door and tend to your inner fire while the world demands you come out and play. You are allowed to disappear for a while and trust that the right people will understand, will wait, will still be there when you emerge transformed. You are allowed to love people from a distance. You are allowed to need time alone even from those you love most. You are allowed to make your home a temple instead of a hotel. You are allowed to honor your energy as sacred. You are allowed to be yourself, your full, unedited, introvert, solitude-loving, depth-seeking, spiritually awake self, without apology. This is not permission from me, really. This is permission from your own soul, spoken through words on a screen, reminding you of what you've always known but been taught to doubt. Your need for solitude is not a flaw. It's your wisdom. The doorbell rings. You smile, and you don't answer, not from fear, but from freedom. Finally free to honor what you've always needed, the sacred space to be utterly, completely, unapologetically alone with the truth of who you are. This is not the end of connection. This is the beginning of authentic presence. This is not isolation. This is homecoming. May your sanctuary remain sacred. May your boundaries stay strong. May your solitude be honored. May your depths be protected. And may you never again apologize for the quiet rebellion of choosing yourself. The spiritually awake don't like visitors, not because they hate the world, but because they've finally learned to love themselves. And that love requires space. Sacred, protected, uninterrupted space. Welcome home to the temple of your own soul. The door is closed, and that is holy. If you made it all the way here, through every word of this exploration, then you already know. You know that feeling, that instant resistance when the doorbell rings, that exhaustion from performing in your own sanctuary, that deep, wordless need for silence that no one else seems to understand. You've been called antisocial, too sensitive, too much, not enough. You've been told something is wrong with you for needing what you need. But here's what I need you to hear. There is nothing broken about you. Your need for solitude is not a disorder. It's discernment. Your resistance to visitors is not coldness. It's wisdom. Your protection of sacred space is not selfishness. It's survival. You are not failing at being human. You're succeeding at being yourself. And that self, the one that lives beneath the masks, the one that emerges only in silence, the one that knows depth is more valuable than performance, that self deserves protection. This channel exists for that self, for the hermits hiding in plain sight, for the introverts apologizing for their nature, for the spiritually awake who are exhausted from explaining why they need what they need. This is not a community of broken people trying to fix themselves. This is a gathering of whole people refusing to break themselves to fit a world that doesn't understand them. So if this resonated, if you felt seen in these words, then do something radical. Stop apologizing and start declaring. Hit that like button, not for the algorithm, but as a declaration. I refuse to feel guilty for protecting my energy. Subscribe to this channel, not just for more content, but as a commitment. I choose depth over distraction. I choose authenticity over performance. I choose myself. Because every time you subscribe, you're voting for a different kind of world. one where solitude is sacred, where boundaries are healthy, where introverts don't have to pretend to be extroverts to be worthy. And here's where it gets powerful. Leave a comment, tell me, and tell everyone else here who needs to hear it, your truth. How do you protect your sacred space? What's your relationship with solitude? Have you been made to feel broken for needing alone time? What's one boundary you're ready to set without apology? Your story matters. Your voice matters. And someone reading your comment right now desperately needs to know they're not alone in this. Because here's what we're building together. A space where depth is valued, where silence is understood, where you can finally exhale and say, "These are my people. They get it." The next video is coming. We'll continue exploring the territories no one else dares to map. The shadow work, the uncomfortable truths, the wisdom that only emerges in solitude. But only if you're here for it. So turn on notifications. Not because I'm asking for it, but because these conversations don't happen anywhere else. And you deserve to be reminded, regularly, that your nature is not a flaw. Before you go, let me say this one more time, because you need to hear it. Your solitude is sacred. Your boundaries are holy. Your need for alone time is not something to apologize for. You are not antisocial. You are spiritually awake. And the world needs your depth more than it needs your performance. So keep your door closed when you need to. Keep protecting your sanctuary. Keep honoring the hermit phase. Keep choosing yourself. The right people will understand. The right relationships will survive your boundaries. And the version of you that emerges from that sacred solitude. That's the version the world has been waiting for. Until the next exploration. Stay deep. Stay protected. Stay unapologetically you. And remember, the doorbell can ring all at once. You don't have to answer. See you in the sanctuary.